believe what ideal they had next for the cave. I can't believe they even attempted this. Can you believe that in 1816, the owners of the cave thought that people would come here from all over the world, buy a ticket, and tour this place? I cannot believe they tried it. But we are the second longest tourist attraction in the United States behind the Niagara Falls. If you come back and visit us in 2016, we're going to be partying around here because we're going to be celebrating three things. One will be the 75th year of us being a national park. Number two will be the 100th year of the National Park Service. And then the big one, number three, will be 200 years of us touring Mammoth Cave. So if you come back and see us in 2016, we're already getting ready for it. We're going to be having a big year-long party. But we've got a lot to celebrate, especially the 200 years. Now, had you been on a cave tour back then, you more than likely would have been led through the cave with an African-American slave. You would have been carrying one of these. This is a replica of a whale oil lantern. Now, needless to say, there's not a lot of whales in Kentucky. So what they would do is on the way to work, they would go to the hotel, go to the kitchen, and get some of the used cooking grease. And then they would use that for their fuel. So back in those days on a tour, you might smell a little fried chicken, a little country ham, a little bacon on your tour. I'll wait just a minute, bud, okay? So it was that different time there, but it was a lot cheaper to use this grease than used for their fuel. Now, as I mentioned, you would have been led through the cave with it by an African-American slave. In 1837, three young men were brought to Mammoth Cave, Nick and Matt Bransford and Stephen Bishop. These were African-American boys, about 17, 18 years old, brought here from Glasgow, a little town not far from here. And in Glasgow, they were probably doing farm-type, manual-type labor. But when they were brought to Mammoth Cave, they were soon told, you're going to start leading tours. So they may have spent about 4 or 5 days following behind one of the guides that had been here for a while, kind of learning the tour route. And then at the end of that week, they were handed this and said, all right, here you go, it's your turn. So just imagine you spend about 5 days with Joel and I, and we show you where to go, where to stop, and give this to you, and say, okay, it's your turn. That's about the amount of training. Now, I'm going to talk some about Stephen Bishop for the rest of our trip today, folks. And there's been 3 famous guides that have worked at Mammoth Cave throughout its entire history. That would be myself, my partner Joel, and Stephen Bishop. Stephen this summer got up to 3rd place. But folks, if there was anybody ever made to be a guide, it was Stephen. He was not an educated man, but he was a very smart young man. He took information in very well. He was very well spoken, had a very good rapport with people. Now, Stephen learned a lot from his visitors, because at this time period, the average American was not coming to Mammoth Cave. The average American didn't get a 2-week vacation. The average American was working 6 to 7 days a week just to survive. So folks like you, the rich, wealthy, educated people, came to Mammoth Cave. And Stephen learned a lot from these people. And he would take that information and turn around and use it on his tours. A lot of scientists came here to study the geology of the cave. They came here from around the world. Of course, what better place to do that than right here? Stephen would learn geology from these gentlemen. He would turn around and use that on his cave tours. We believe Stephen could speak up to 3 languages. He may spend 6 months to a year with a German or French scientist. You spend that much time with that person, you would, of course, slowly pick that language up. So the visitors were just as important to Stephen as he was to them. Now, also, when Stephen and the other slaves were down here in Mammoth Cave, these were good times. They enjoyed their times down here because folks like you put their trust in them, like you have us, that they were going to get them in and out of the cave safely. They would talk to Stephen. They would ask him questions. They treated him with respect. Folks, a sad part of our history is when that tour was over and the slaves went back up to the surface, that changed. They're slaves. We don't talk to slaves. We don't have anything to do with them. They're low class. But down here it was different. They were treated like human beings. Now it's so sad that's part of our history, but that's the way it was back then. So down in the cave, this was good times down here. Now when Stephen wasn't leading tours, he was given an opportunity to explore the cave. He thought there's got to be a lot more cave than what we're showing people. We're going to get to the bottomless pit here in a little bit. The bottomless pit is called that because they would light pieces of paper on fire, throw it over the edge, the fire would burn out before it hit the bottom. They would throw rocks over the edge. The rocks would hit a sandy bottom, not make a sound. When Stephen first got here, you went to the bottomless pit, you turned around and went back out of the cave. One day after a tour, a gentleman by the name of H.C. Stevenson pulls him off to the side and asks that question, has anybody ever been across that pit? Of course, Stephen said, no, sir. He said, I tell you what, I got a deal for you. If you're willing, the next couple of days, we'll go across that pit, I'll pay you. Well, Stephen really wasn't concerned about the money. He was more excited about to see what was on the other side. So he goes up on the surface. He gets an old cedar tree. He drags that tree in here. He throws it over that pit. He puts this lantern in his teeth, and he shimmies across to the other side. When he got to the other side, he discovered parts of the cave that no one, not even the prehistoric people, had ever seen before. He found Fat Man's, Tall Man's Misery, the Mammoth Dome. He discovered the cave had an underground river system. No one had known this before Stephen found it. Now, folks, we're going to go across that bottomless pit here in just a few moments. And I have got to stress to you that safety is of the utmost importance. You have got to be extra, extra, extra careful. That tree is getting old. Be careful. Now, I'm, of course, kidding, folks. There is a great bridge. If you're scared of heights, go across real fast. If not, look down and you'll get an appreciation for how brave Stephen was. So I plan to have some more Stephen stories for you at our next stop. But before we go, I'm going to give you a set of bragging rights today. Folks, we are in the longest cave system in the entire world today at 400 miles. I'm going to give you an opportunity to go back to your family and friends and brag to them that you were able to experience and see all 400 miles. But I need you to help me. If you could turn off your cameras and your cell phones, anything that puts out light, if you could turn those off. If any of my children have blinky shoes, stand still for a few moments. If you are scared of the dark, close your eyes and keep them closed till I say open them back up. You'll never know anything ever happened. And folks, when I get the lantern out, if we could just be real still and quiet, and let's try to listen to the cave as well. Now, in Stephen's day, they didn't have glass around these lanterns. Glass was expensive. Also, using that old cooking grease, it put out thick smoke, so it would soot the glass up in just a few moments. So they might be swinging this thing along too much, and this happens. Let's be real quiet. Make sure your lights are turned on. Listen to the cave. All right, folks, here it is. This is what all 400 miles looks like. You have seen it. Maybe you didn't see it. You can go brag about it. But this is total darkness unlike anywhere else in the world except the deepest depths of the ocean. You can wave your hand in front of your face. You won't see it. Your brain says it's there, but you can't see it. But folks, it's not the darkness. It's the silence of the cave. If you're not around dripping water, the cave is a deathly quiet place. And a lot of experts believe it's not the darkness that would get to you, it's the silence. And I agree with it. This is not a fun place to be down here by yourself in the dark. The dark doesn't bother you, but it's quiet down here. And if you lost your light, you'd probably start humming and singing and hitting rocks together, talking to yourself, anything to make noise. Now up on the surface, if I lift this lighter, you wouldn't pay a bit of attention to it when you know a lit the thing. But damn Kozad lives in there. Kozad is a real irritable fella. And every day about this time, he takes a nap after he eats his lunch. And I was in here about 2 weeks ago on a cave tour about this size. They were a real kind of noisy, rowdy group. And all of a sudden, the lid of the coffin started to raise up. You look behind him and I see a shadow. And then Kozad stuck his head out and said, "Get quiet out there in my cave. I'm trying to take a nap." So it got quiet, and he laid back down, and the lid of the coffin slowly lowered down. Boom! Kozad went back to sleep. Folks, there is a Kozad, Nebraska. We don't know if somebody from that town wrote that or somebody's last name. I have seen pictures of the giant's coffin with that not on there. And I don't know if he ever did it or not, but I bet Stephen Bishop probably stood right up there and talked to people and told stories. And I would love more than anything to climb up there and talk to y'all, but my supervisors won't let me do it. Something about liability. Before I retire from the Park Service, though, I'm climbing up there. Questions? Any